I would like to start with a story about a woman. We'll call her Mary. So, Mary is an African American woman in her mid 60s who had lost her faith in the medical system. She'd finally come into a doctor's office to address an untreated ankle fracture, but her labs showed severely uncontrolled diabetes. So, we had to start her right away on insulin because her sugar levels were dangerously high. But she decided she would make a few changes to what she ate. Month after month, we monitored her levels and we were able to wean her first off of insulin, then injectable medications, and finally oral medications. Her A1C, for those who are aware of it, dropped down into the pre-diabetic range and she was medication free. She felt like a brand new person, and it was all possible by just changing what she ate. So, why is what we eat so important? As it turns out, 8 out of the top 10 killers in the United States are directly impacted by diet. So the biggest predictor of how we die is what we eat. Not genetics, which only accounts for about 10 to 20% of the risk. Not luck, but diet. Now, does anyone know what the number one killer in the US is? Heart disease, awesome. Yeah, not awesome, but yes, you're right. And unfortunately, the rates of heart disease and its risk factors, high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol, have all gone up over the last few decades. So, what's changed? Right? Spoiler alert, it's what we eat. It's not our genetics. So, what does this mean? It means that even if you have the worst family history, even if, like me, nearly all of your mother's siblings has type 2 diabetes and rely on insulin, you actually have much more of a say in your health than you might think. Your genes do not determine your destiny. So I've got 2 intentions for the talk today. One is to show you how the foods that we eat either feed or fight disease, and our number one killer. And 2, I want to introduce a healthy way to build your plate. Before I dive into the information, I have to ask you all a very important question. Why do you want to be healthy? So, I assume you're all here listening to me talk because maybe you want to be healthy, right? If not, somebody dragged you. But take a moment to reflect. Why do you want to be healthy? Do you want to get off of medications? Do you want to prevent another heart attack or stroke? Do you want to prevent breast cancer, colon cancer? Do you want to be able to move around without assistance in your later years? Right? Do you want to be able to keep up with your kids, your grandkids, or maybe you want them to keep up with you? So, why do you want to be healthy? Anyone want to share? You can shout it out.
Live longer.
Live longer?
Good quality of life.
Be around for your grandkids? Did you say you don't have them yet? Not yet, but
Good quality of life.
good quality of life, absolutely. So I want to make the most out of this one life I have. Whether I've got future lives after this or not, I want to make the best use of this one life that I have. So this is the most important question to ask yourself. Why? And it's a good idea to write this down somewhere. Maybe put it on your fridge, your bathroom mirror, something like that. That way you can remember your why. So if being healthy and making the most out of this life is your goal, then it will be much easier to line up your daily actions with your goals and values. So now, most of us grew up eating what's called the standard American diet, or SNAG diet for short, without realizing how much it impacts our health. So the standard American diet is high in processed foods, animal products, sugar, and do you know what that little sliver of the processed plant foods there is? Exactly. It's French fries and ketchup. So not health foods, right? So this way of eating is directly linked to an increased risk of heart disease and its risk factors: high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol. And the good news is that there is a much happier way to eat. So we'll talk about that in a second. So now I want to talk about the risk factors I mentioned. So the first one is high blood pressure. So we get this checked every time we go to the doctor's office. We want this top number to be less than 130 and bottom number less than 80. Both of those need to be in that range. Ideally, you want that top number to be less than 120 and bottom number less than 80 and not on any meds at all. So this is really important because every single second that that blood pressure is high, it's doing damage to the blood vessels that go to the eyes, to the kidneys, right? To literally every part in your body, including the tiny little vessels going to our heart. So it also makes our heart work harder because it has to pump against more pressure. Now, contrary to popular belief, it is not inevitable to develop high blood pressure as we get older. And just because you have a family history of it doesn't mean that you're going to develop it as well. So the risk for high blood pressure, we all know: too much sodium, and then red and processed meats, and sugary drinks. Now, does anyone know what the main source of sodium in the American diet is? Cheese, okay. Anyone else? Packaged foods? Yeah. Chicken? Okay. So it's processed foods, you're right, and restaurant foods. So anytime you go out to eat, so in the American diet, that's the biggest source of sodium, not what you add to your meal at the table. It's what's already in the food if you're eating out, if you're eating processed packaged foods. So the risk of high blood pressure also lowers the more you eat fiber, plants, vegetables, whole grains, nuts. So next up, we have diabetes. So in diabetes, you may have heard of the hemoglobin A1C. So this is a number that represents the average blood sugar level over the last 3 months. So it's checked every year on annual labs. So normal is less than 5.6, 5.6, or sorry, less than 5.7, 5.6 to 6.4 is pre-diabetes, and then 6.5 and up is diabetes. So now the hallmark of diabetes is something called insulin resistance. So I'm going to paint a little picture to explain what insulin resistance is. So we eat food, and all of the nutrients from that food break down into the macronutrients of protein, fat, glucose, etc. in the blood. Now, every single cell in our body requires glucose in order to function. And fat can freely enter these cells, but sugar needs a little invitation. So there's a lock on the gate, and insulin is the key. In a healthy cell, insulin comes along, unlocks the gate, sugar enters the cell where it's converted into energy, everyone's happy. But in a cell with prediabetes or diabetes, what happens is that the lock is gummed up by fat inside of the cell. So then the sugar is stuck outside, and then over time, these blood sugar levels rise, and they cause inflammation and damage to the arteries going literally everywhere. So going to the eyes, it causes diabetic retinopathy. Going to the kidneys, it causes diabetic kidney disease, right? Diabetic nephropathy. And it goes to the vessels innervating our nerves, or vessels going to our nerves, leading to neuropathy. So the hands and the feet, none the same tingling in the hands and the feet. And it also damages those arteries going to the heart and the brain, increasing that risk of our number one killer. So diabetes is very important. Very, very important. So the top three sources of saturated fat that clog up these cells in the American diet are dairy products, especially cheese and milk, meats, especially red processed meats, and baked goods like desserts and pastries. So in a vegan diet, how many of you guys are vegan? Awesome, I'm preaching to the choir a bit here. So, in a vegan diet, though, the biggest sources of saturated fat might be oils, especially coconut oil. So, we'll talk about this a little later, but it's really important to look at the ingredients of what you're consuming. So, and then also vegan meats and cheeses, as well as any processed or snack foods that you might eat. So, those are the biggest sources in the vegan diet, the oil. So, there's also this big misconception that sugar causes diabetes and that fruits are bad for people with diabetes. Now, we can all agree that table sugar is not good for anyone, right? Can all agree with that, I think? Hopefully some heads nodding. But the problem is that when the body is in a state of insulin resistance, we're just not able to handle even healthy sugars. So that is so fruits are not bad for us. All right. So the next risk factor for heart disease, our number one killer, is obesity. Now this is actually a medical condition. So the normal body mass index, which is calculated based on your height and your weight, should be between around 18 to 25. If you're above that, you're in the overweight category, and then over 30, it's in the obesity category. This is a major risk factor for heart attack and stroke. So it's very important for our weight to be normal. And now you see people eating 100% plant-based have the lowest rates of overweight and obesity. And by the way, losing even a little bit, 5 to 10% of our body weight can improve insulin sensitivity dramatically. So you can reverse diabetes by losing that weight. Next major risk factor is high cholesterol. So in terms of the levels, we want our total cholesterol to be less than 200, but ideally we want it to be less than 150. So I encourage you all, when you get your annual labs, that's what you want to aim for. And we want our LDL, or our main bad cholesterol, to be less than 100, ideally less than 70. And LDL is this bad cholesterol that sneaks into our arteries, builds up plaque, and slowly clogs our arteries, leading to heart attacks and strokes. So it clogs the arteries of the brain, the arteries of the heart, literally everywhere in the body. And we know that cholesterol is directly linked to heart disease. So the higher your LDL level, the higher your risk. The lower your LDL, the lower your risk. I will say that you can have a perfectly normal cholesterol level and still get heart attacks. There's a lot of people who do. But if you have an elevated cholesterol level, it's really important to bring that down as much as you can. Now, in the American diet, the major sources of dietary cholesterol are your animal products, especially eggs, processed meat, red meat, and cheese at the top of the list. Now, our bodies need cholesterol, but did you know that it actually produces all the cholesterol it needs? We don't need to eat it, right? Our body actually produces all the cholesterol that it needs. So studies also show that people who eat mostly whole plant foods, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes like beans, chickpeas, lentils, they have lower total and LDL, or bad cholesterol levels, compared to those who eat an animal-based diet. We also know that these foods improve inflammation and protect the arteries from damage. So they help lower that risk. And then I mentioned that the optimal levels, total cholesterol, you want that to be less than 150, and the LDL cholesterol less than 70. These are the levels at which you might actually see reversal of some of that plaque buildup in your arteries. So if you've ever had a heart attack or stroke, you're probably not any of you guys guys are mostly me. But these are the levels a cardiologist would have you aim for in order to reduce your risk of a second heart attack or stroke, right? So those optimal levels. But really, everyone should be aiming for these, right? Wouldn't you agree? So that brings us to our number one killer, heart disease. Did you know that the earliest signs of heart disease, so fatty streaks, have been seen in the arteries of children as young as 10? So all of us, well, I don't know about all of us, we have some degree of heart disease from a very, very young age. So the good news is that we can actually reverse heart disease. So the image on the right, for the ones who can see it, is actually the return of normal blood flow to the left anterior descending artery of the heart. So this is actually what's called the widowmaker, if you're aware of it, where if you have a heart attack of this artery, a lot of times you die. That's why it's called the widowmaker, or the widower maker. So this basically when you follow a plant-based diet, this study showed that you could actually return that normal blood flow with diet. So, and then when it comes to diet, it is so helpful in so many different things. So I want to share a couple of stories here. I had a woman who was in her 60s who came in for abdominal pain and diarrhea. And given her age, she underwent a whole GI workup. I had to send her to a gastroenterologist to get colonoscopy done to screen for colon cancer. Thankfully, it all came back normal, and the doctor gave her some medications, benzyl, dicyclomine, for IBS. Well, I recommend a plant-based diet for her, and she cut out dairy from her diet fully, and her symptoms completely went away. And then she ate ice cream a little bit later, and she's like, "Oh, it's back." So she learned what triggered her pain and her symptoms. And then I had another woman who she went plant-based because I recommended it. I didn't talk about arthritis, but she came back to me and she said, "Hey, doc, the pain in my knees is completely gone." She was obese. The pain in her knees was completely gone, and she was able to walk the length of a football field without any pain, whereas previously she would have had to take a golf cart to go that distance. So that was an unintended positive side effect. And then I want to mention the gallbladder disease. I had a 32-year-old woman who came into the office for severe pain. She could barely get up onto the exam table. And she said, "I'm here for a referral to surgery. I need to get my gallbladder removed." And I said, "Okay, looks like you're in terrible pain. I'm gonna go ahead and put in that referral. But by the way, here's a way that you can eat. I give it to everyone." And so I gave her my spiel on that. So she went away and she came back a month later and she said the pain went away after 3 days. She went to the surgeon and said, "Oh, we don't really need to take her gallbladder out anymore. It's not an urgent thing. But if you want, we can do a weight loss surgery." I'm like, no, 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 no. Because she had lost 14 pounds in that time just by changing what she ate. So it's really, really powerful. It can help with so many different things. Now, who here likes to take pills? Like taking pills? No? No. Well, so you might say, "I'm good. I'm taking lisinopril for my high blood pressure. I'm taking atorvastatin for my cholesterol. I've got metformin on board for my prediabetes and my diabetes. Doctor said I'm going to be fine." But meds do not treat the cause of disease. Medications do not treat the cause of a disease. It wasn't a lisinopril deficiency that gave somebody high blood pressure or a statin deficiency that gave them high cholesterol, right? They don't treat the cause of disease, and diet is safer and more effective. All right. So, actually, on that note, wanted to mention that long-term use of statins can actually cause type 2 diabetes in people who don't already have it, right? And the weight loss medications, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, all of them, they come with huge risks for pancreatitis, gallstones, and thyroid cancer. So I would say medications are toxins with a few good side effects. So they're important to save your life. If your blood pressure is super high, you have to be on insulin if your blood sugar levels are super high. But wouldn't it be nice to please avoid the drugs completely? So that's where the whole food plant-based diet comes in. And remember the sad diet? This is the happier way to eat. This right here. So whole means unprocessed. The more you process the food, the fewer nutrients it has. So we'll take the example of an orange. You're going from an orange to orange juice. You lose almost all of the fiber, and you lose about a third of the vitamin C. That people say, oh, gotta get some of that, orange juice in. Well, better to eat the orange, right? So I kind of tend to put food groups into two kind of categories: foods that promote health and foods that promote disease. So in the category of foods that promote health would be your fruits. So everything on your fruits, vegetables, whole grains like quinoa, brown rice, lentils, beans, chickpeas, etc., and nuts and seeds. So the more you eat of those foods, the more you think, I'm voting for health. I don't want diabetes. I don't want cancer. And then in the category of foods that promote disease, top of the list is going to be your bacon and processed meats. I think most of you guys probably don't like bacon. That's right, at a veg fest. But in addition to being super high in saturated fat, right, that fat that leads to clogged arteries, it's also a class 1 carcinogen, meaning that it directly causes colon cancer. Just like tobacco directly causes lung cancer. And then just below bacon and processed meats would be your red meats. It would be pork, steak, etc. These are class 2 carcinogens. Super high in saturated fat, but they also probably contribute to colon cancer. And then after that, you have your white meat, like chicken and turkey, eggs and dairy, processed foods. So this would include any of your box foods, TV dinners, processed snack foods, fake meats, fake cheeses, processed vegan foods, candies. You get the idea, right? So whenever we are putting a food in that category into our body, we're saying, I'd like that heart attack, right? So it's not as clear as that. We just want to bump up those whole plant foods and just reduce the animal products and processed foods. So when you go to the grocery store, you mostly want to get foods that don't even require an ingredients list. So take an apple. Let's turn it over. What's in there? You don't need an ingredients list for these whole plant foods, right? Most of the time. So if there is an ingredients list, you want to look for just very few items on there. And the more items that are on there, the more likely it is processed. Now, the really good thing about health and nutrition is that every little bit counts. It is not all or nothing. Your health is determined by how you eat the majority of the time, not what you eat on Thanksgiving, coming up, Christmas, or your birthday. Remember Mary from earlier? She didn't go all the way. She was still eating occasional cheese, eggs, butter, chicken, but she was still able to reverse her diabetes. Now, wherever you are with your diet or your health, just remember that every tiny little bit counts. So adding whole plant foods, which you're already eating, is a really great place to start. If you're just eating one handful of veggies a day, bump that up to 2. If you're not eating any berries every day, right? Maybe eat some dark sweet cherries or some frozen mango. It's not all or nothing. So the same goes for foods that promote disease. So we talked about those cancer-causing foods, bacon and processed meats, that cause colon cancer. Cigarettes also cause cigarettes also cause lung cancer, right? But there is a huge difference between, smoking one cigarette a week versus a pack a day. Wouldn't you say? So it's all about how often you're eating these foods. It's really not all or nothing. So if you're eating meat or dairy 3 times a day and you reduce it to twice a day, guess what? You're doing a great job. So now with these main food groups, fruits and vegetables reduce your risk of diabetes and all of those other major risk factors. And we want to select unprocessed or minimally processed options. So what do I mean by this? We want to avoid those deep fried vegetables, you know, fruit-based desserts, etc. We want to stick to the whole plant food as much as possible. Legumes. So these are your beans, chickpeas, lentils, peas. All of the rest of all of those risk factors for heart disease decreases with legume intake. So if you just add 1 serving of beans to exactly what you're eating right now, you're really going to lower that risk. Again, with this, we want to stick to beans, lentil, peas, tofu, tempeh. We want to really avoid deep fried tofu, those salty bean snacks, chips and crackers and things. We want to limit those in our diet as much as we can. Whole grains, again, broken record here. They're going to reduce your risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, and cholesterol. And we want to stick with those whole intact grains. So that's where you have the outer bran layer that contains so much fiber. When we process it into white rice or a refined carbohydrate, what happens is you're just left with that sugary inside. So you want to keep the whole grains whole as much as possible. And then nuts and seeds. So those eating 4 more servings of nuts a week reduce their risk of diabetes compared to those eating less than 1 serving of nuts a week. And then with these, you want to go for variety and omega-3s. So omega-3s are high in your chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. And you can see from the chart there, you really want to aim for variety when it comes to these. And same goes for this. You want to opt for the unprocessed or minimally processed choices. So you want to avoid those nuts and seeds with really sugary, salted coatings, anything with added sweeteners, oils, and salts. So that brings us to the healthy way to build your plate. So this is what I typically recommend to everyone. You want to aim for, at least a third of your plate be vegetables. So oil-free, non-starchy vegetables as much as possible. And out of this category, your dark leafy greens are going to be the most bang for your buck. So you can just add a serving of spinach to your diet every day, and that will make a huge difference. There's no upper limit when it comes to veggies. So aim for like 5 to 6 servings a day, rough handfuls a day, but the more the merrier when it comes to that. And then legumes. So this takes place of the meat or animal-based protein on the plate. So beans, chickpeas, lentils, etc. And then we have our whole grains and the starches as well, about a third of the plate. So that's what I recommend. And we got our nuts and seeds on the side. I want to say one more thing about nuts and seeds. So flax seeds have actually been shown to reduce and regulate cholesterol and blood pressure. So 1 tablespoon of flaxseed a day can be really helpful for those who are struggling with that. But you want to make sure that you have it ground up, like in a smoothie or something, because if you poop it out whole, you're not getting any of those nutrients, right? So just a caveat there. And then we got fruits as well. The most bang for your buck fruits are going to be your berries, right? So you want to, again, eat as many of these foods as you can. There is no upper limit when it comes to the fruits on the plate. A couple of tips for this. So frozen is just as good as fresh, and Some of my favorite snack foods are these frozen dark sweet cherries and frozen mango. So, and then you can get frozen vegetables. You can steam them in a batch. And you also don't have to go to a health food store in order to eat healthy food. So you can find these in any local grocery store, right? And then another thing I want to say is that it's really a good idea to meal prep. Now, not just your meals, but you can meal prep your snacks, you can meal prep your breakfast, and you can meal prep your desserts. So, for instance, I like to make big batches of nice cream, just blended frozen bananas and cinnamon and some vanilla extract, and then I like to put it out onto those silicone muffin pans, and then you freeze it, and then once it's frozen, you just transfer that to a Ziploc bag, reusable Ziploc bag, and you just store it in the freezer, and then when that sweet tooth attacks, like it does for me, just grab one of those there, you got a perfectly nice serving size of nice cream, and you're just eating whole plant foods. It's delicious. You gotta try it. But the same thing you can do for like batch prepping smoothies as well, for instance. So you can just put all the smoothie ingredients into a Ziploc bag and throw it in the freezer, and then in the morning just dump that out into the blender, and then add a few things like water, and then blend it up, and you're good to go. And then now I want to talk about just some protein swaps. So you can replace meat with lentils in soups, chilies, stews, and tacos. And people here have probably heard of scrambled tofu, so that's going to be a much better option for you compared to scrambled eggs. When it comes to whole grains, you want to choose whole intact grains like quinoa or brown rice over white rice as often as possible. And then swapping dairy milk with soy milk, which has the highest protein content out of all the non-dairy alternatives, that is a great protein swap as well. And then tempeh is especially high in protein as well, so that is good to add in. But I know Jacinda is going to be talking about protein later, but you don't have to worry about that when you're vegan because you will get plenty if you eat all of these foods. So now I want to talk about calorie density. So this is the number of calories, excuse me, per pound in various foods. So this is the most important thing to understand if you're wanting to manage your weight, if you're trying to lose weight, get into that healthy body mass index. There's a green zone, yellow zone, and a red zone. Now, oil-free, non-starchy veggies have the lowest calorie density, around 100 calories per pound. When you look at the opposite side of the chart, oils have the most. They are 100% fat, 4,000 calories per pound. So if you're trying to lose weight, you want to stick to the green zone as much as possible. So this is another depiction of what these 500 calories looks like in your belly. So you want to fill up on these whole plant foods. It'll hit the top of the stomach, send a message to your brain saying, hey, I'm full, because it'll hit those stretch receptors. And you'll have consumed so many few calories than if you were consuming meat or cheese or any processed foods. So I just wanted to put this in there for all the vegans out here. These are not health foods. Your Beyond Meats, Impossible Burgers, etc. They still contribute to disease. So just putting that out there. And then vegan junk foods. Publix came out with these salted caramel cookies earlier this year. And one day I had a really, really long day, and I thought, I want something sugary. So I got that, I got some vegan ice cream, and I came home, popped myself on the couch, and I'm like, yes, this is so good. I'm putting it in my mouth, I'm eating it, and almost like 10 minutes later, I'm like, no, should not have done that. So yeah, these foods are not healthful. We may be vegan and it's great ethically, but they're not healthful. So now I invite you all to close your eyes for a minute. Just trust me here. Take a couple deep breaths and imagine the healthiest version of yourself. You're pouring the best possible fuel into your body. You're making better choices for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're aligning your daily actions with your goals. You're not living to eat, you're eating to live. What does that look like? What does it feel like? How is your life different in this version of it? Maybe like Mary, you're no longer on medications. Maybe you're able to walk for longer with ease. Maybe you're finally able to keep up with your kids, your grandkids, or your pets. Now open your eyes. I'm here to tell you that that vision of yourself is possible. I want to summarize because that was a lot of information. So, three big takeaways. The biggest predictor of how we die is what we eat. Number two, you can reduce your risk of heart disease, our number one killer, by increasing whole plant foods in the diet and reducing animal products and processed foods. And number three, every little bit counts. So I want to leave you with a quote. I did then what I needed to do. Now that I know better, I do better. Any questions? This was just some information here. I have some handouts somewhere here with the healthy plate on there if you'd like to check it out. I also have a follow-up if anyone wants to. Any questions? Sorry.
What foods do you recommend for iron deficiency, and how to best make it available for the body to absorb?
Yeah. So iron is a little bit tricky. So you want to, so lentils, so legumes, and then a lot of the vegetables are also high in iron. So you want to eat those foods. One thing about iron is that some things can affect its absorption. So you want to space it away from caffeine, like green tea, coffee, things like that. It needs to be a little bit distance from there. And in some people, eating it with a form of vitamin C, so like lemon on your food, can increase the absorption of that. So, but we don't, I check ferritin level, which is the gold standard for testing for iron deficiency, and men do not have an issue with that, honestly. Like 99% of the time, it's women because we lose blood every month, mostly. So, but I would get the ferritin level checked. Every woman really needs to get that checked.
Do you have any information to share about microgreens?
What's that? Microgreens?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
nutritional benefit.
Yeah. So microgreens. Well, honestly, I'm not. I can't speak too much to that per se. I think I would say, if you add those to your diet, that's fantastic. That's going to help because it's going to vote. You're voting for health. So I would say go for it. But I would just say, I don't believe in like superfoods. You want to eat those whole plant foods as much as you can, because if you're eating a junky diet and you're eating processed food, and you just have a handful of kale here or there or microgreens, it's not going to do a big, it's not going to have a big difference. Go ahead.
If there's a concern about kidney stones, does it affect how you presented a general diet?
So no, and Jacinda can speak more to this, but there's really not. So and you get certain recommendations from physicians, but the evidence doesn't really line up with avoiding. Yeah, it's animal protein that really contributes to kidney disease and increases the risk of kidney stones. And I know my time is kind of up here, but if anyone wants to ask me any questions or get those handouts, you can feel free to find me. Is somebody else? Oh yeah. Hey, Jared. Well, I went to the USF College of Medicine with this guy here, so that's how that happened. And then I got board certified in lifestyle medicine, so that really helped. Anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Any tips for us on bringing some to natural resources, information, something from the
Yeah. So we are both members of the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. So I would highly encourage them to check them out. We have there's an American College of ACLM and a Board of Lifestyle Medicine. Their conferences every year, and actually like the biggest thing is just leading by example. If you show up there and you're like, yep, all the labs are great, LDL below 70. What are you eating, right? You might ask me. Yeah, I made one for myself actually when I was in residency and then when I was in practice. So I would give these handouts out, but there are plenty of them online. PCRM. What's that?
The doctors need to live it. They're
Yeah, the doctors they don't see it to believe it,
They
honestly.
need to
So
live it to
it's
be able to get the example.
yeah. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Thank you. He is also a great friend of mine, so I'm so blessed and happy that she presented to her today. She is a beautiful person inside and out. So if you guys have any questions, she can step to the side over to the speaker's tent to the left of us if you would love to talk to her afterwards.